I think governments need to cut back as well. Since this economic crisis hit, a lot of people now are cutting back on spending, of course, because maybe you lost your job, maybe there's a threat that you might lose your job, maybe you had to take a pay increase, or for whatever reason, people now are cutting back on their spending. And another thing, a very good thing that's happening now, is the lost concept of saving money is now has been given a rebirth. People are actually saving money again. You know, for the longest time, for years and years and years, you know, people just always had this notion that if I want something, I'll just pull out Mr. Plastic and I'll buy it whether I have the money or not. So it actually is good news to hear that people are saving money again. Now, see, now this is the problem that I have. I don't think it's fair that, you know, all, you know, average Joes and taxpayers, whatever, we're all now saving money and we're cutting back, we're being responsible. You know, maybe you're not eating out as much, maybe you're not eating out at all anymore. You know, and people are actually now watching their money, they're budgeting, they're saving money now, they're being responsible. But the problem is, though, governments, though, are still spending as if there was no recession. You got to realize that when this economic crisis hit, everything shrank. The size of the economy shrank, people's income shrank, their disposable income shrank, people's retirement money shrank, you had people's confidence in the economy shrank. You know, you had everything shrank. The labor market shrank. Supply for or demand for everything shrank. You had everything shrinking all across the board, but yet government is still the same size as what it was before the economic crisis hit. See, this is the problem. Is governments, once they get bigger, they never get small again. You know, governments continue creating new political jobs and new government jobs and public servant jobs, and they keep creating new ministries and new departments and increasing the size of current departments and ministries. And you notice one thing about the government is once it gets bigger, it never gets small. It's like it's permanent. You know, when times are good, government it gets bigger, but then all of a sudden when times are bad, it never shrinks. So, you know, that's a problem. You have this monster-sized government that requires this huge amount of money to sustain itself, right? But, you know, I will agree that there's less revenue coming in now to governments, of course, because we, the taxpayers, we now have less revenue ourselves. We have less coming in now. So, of course, governments then have less money coming in. Now, I won't disagree with that. But the problem is, though, governments then have to cut back. They have to, you know, don't spend so much. You got to realize you have less revenue now. You know, I think government should cut their spending, you know, and they all should shrink the size of the government. You know, I want to see some politicians laid off. I mean, that's how the real world works. You know, let's say if I have a business and all of a sudden demand for my product is falling. Now, it's unfortunate, but, you know, I'm going to have to lay some people off. That's how the real world works. Right? If I have, you know, less business, less demand for my product, I'm going to have to start laying people off. And then, of course, when times are good again, I start hiring people then. That's how the real world is supposed to work. But in politics, it doesn't work like that. You know, you have this monstrous government that requires so much money to sustain itself. And governments all over the world are running these huge budget deficits. These huge budget deficits because they're spending as if there was no recession. You know, they're spending the amount of money that they had before, but they have less revenue coming in. That's the problem. So then they run up these huge budget deficits and then simply hand you and me the bill. You know, Obama said just a few days ago, he said, quote, we have to spend our way out of this recession. Now, this is the thing. I don't have a problem with governments spending their way out of recessions. However, I only agree to that if governments actually have the money that they're spending. I mean, that's the thing. You can't spend yourself out of a recession if you don't have the money to spend. I mean, it goes back to the, you know, when you're a kid and you learn of the concept of saving for a rainy day, right? Now, it's raining right now, but the problem is, you know, America doesn't have any rainy day money. It didn't save any rainy day money. You know, you turn the piggy bank upside down and the only thing that falls out are IOUs. That's the problem. Again, I don't have a problem with government spending for rainy days and spending to get out of recessions as long as there's actual money there that was put there for occasions like now, right? But that's the problem. You see? This is the thing. You have China, though, on the other hand. Now, China did stimulate the economy as well. They did, you know, just like a lot of countries of the world, they did stimulate their economy, but there's a big difference. China actually has the money to stimulate their economy. China has over $2 trillion in reserves that they've saved for years and years and years. It took years to amass that kind of exchange reserves and gold reserves and all whatever reserves they have. But that's the thing. China spent money they actually had. So I agree with it in that case. I believe that Ron Paul is right when he advocates for a smaller government. Because you have to realize if the government were smaller, then the amount of tax revenue that governments would require to sustain the government, it wouldn't be so high. So taxes wouldn't have to be so high. I think governments need to, like I said, if I have a business, I have to adapt to changes in the economic market and in the economic weather. All of a sudden things change. Like I said, you'll have to lay people off and make less goods to adjust to the current economic market. But politicians and government, they don't do that. You have a politician gets a job and they have these cushy jobs for the rest of their lives, whether times are good or times are bad, it makes no difference. I don't think it's fair that again, governments run up these huge budget deficits and simply hand you and me the bill. And of course, then taxpayers that haven't even been born yet are going to be burdened with all these deficits they'll have to pay through higher taxes, even though the deficit was accumulated before they were even born. So that's the thing. Governments need to shrink. They need to make the government smaller. They need to lay people off. I want to see politicians laid off, and I want to see spending cut. I want to see governments being responsible like we average Joes and taxpayers are. We're saving money now. We're cutting back and being responsible. I think it's time the government does the same thing. That's what has to happen. Anyway, thanks for listening. That's my opinion on this, and have a great day. Thanks.